Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Smart Talk. Melissa and Mark and I are here, and we are very honored and privileged to have this platform to have a conversation with our friends and family today on a very important topic. And I'm just going to start off right with what's happening in the world, and we want to chime in. And we're going to let Mark really talk to us as his friends and family about this situation. And I was really very, very concerned when I was tootling around on the news. Melissa and Mark know that I love the news, and I still sneak in on there, keep what's going on. And I know a lot of times it's not good news, but I wanted to bring this out to the awareness. And I was so shocked and appalled that I called Mark and Melissa right away. So we need to talk. And what better place than Smart Talk? This is what got to me. According to the Washington Post, Black women are more than 3 times as likely as white women to die of childbirth-related causes, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. CNN says Black newborn babies in the United States are more likely to survive childbirth if they are cared for by Black doctors, but 3 times, listen closely, 3 times more likely than white babies to die when looked after by white doctors, a study has found. I'm speechless, Mark. We need to just open this conversation.
You know, it's interesting because people have put their head in the sand for so long to say that this is not happening. The numbers don't lie, right? If we're going to be honest, if we're going to have a conversation with our friends and family, the numbers don't lie. This is about the same thing we're dealing with COVID, right? There's a disproportionate effect of COVID on the Black and brown communities, but yet more white folks are getting the vaccination. Like, why the disparity? It's because we don't have the access and we don't have the equity when it comes to financial resources. There was an interesting report on just yesterday I saw that was saying one of the barriers to getting the COVID vaccination was a smartphone. Well,
Really?
if you're poor, well, think about how much a brand new iPhone costs.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay.
Right? You know, some people are still walking around with flip phones. I know we think it's funny, but people don't have that kind of money to spend on a telephone when you've got to decide between, your medication, your food.
Makes sense.
It's way down the priority list.
Of course it is.
And so there's a community health organization in the greater Los Angeles area that's going around with pen and paper to register people for the vaccines, right? It's not just vaccine hesitancy that's keeping Black and brown communities away. There are other barriers that we don't want to talk about, and they're predominantly socioeconomic, just like you're seeing with those childbirth stats. Black mothers don't have prenatal care. All these things we take for granted out in the beautiful suburbs are things that aren't happening for Black and brown.
What really got to me, Mark, was that more Black babies would die in the hands of a white doctor. To me, that's like, that shouldn't be a statistic. What does it matter? And so when I saw that, I'm like, I'm just speechless. It just aggravates me.
From a personal point of view, I was on the wrong blood pressure medication for 5 years. When I lived in Baltimore, when I lived in Michigan, I was being treated by white doctors. I moved to Atlanta. I got an African-American physician, and I showed him which medication I was on. I bought all my medications in for my initial physical. And he said, "Why are you taking this medication?" I said, "Well, this is what the doctors gave me." And he said, and at that point, he said, "Stop being treated by white physicians."
Wow.
That was in 2002.
Breaks my heart.
But I'm gonna
That was in
interrupt you.
2002.
So why? So are they just more dismissive of Black patients? Like, why do you think that they gave you a medication that was not serving you correctly or efficiently?
Well, that's a great question, Melissa, because I thought I was going to some of the best doctors that those locations had to offer. I mean, I was down at Johns Hopkins, in that community. So I'm thinking, like, how is this possible? I mean, we had conversations about this several times on several visits, and he spent hours with me explaining why our physiological makeup is different, the stresses we deal with is different, our diets are very different.
Really?
When you think about the differences in African American and white culture, they are very different, and it manifests itself in our medical care and treatment. So there was a key component that my blood pressure medication was missing. And he said, any Black doctor would have said, you got to have that in here. And you wonder why your blood pressure is not under control. It's because that portion is not in the medication that you've been prescribed.
Mark, so do you think, like, Melissa, it's a great question. I wasn't thinking that. So do you think it might just be an honest mistake that I can't imagine them going to Johns Hopkins and not being trained in all races and all types of human beings?
Doesn't sound like they are.
No. So is it like an honest mistake? Do you think they're neglecting in some cases on purpose? I don't know what the problem is. If we can pinpoint, it might help.
I think it's a microcosm of society. You're going to have people who have certain beliefs. I mean, if there was a BuzzFeed report that came out last spring that said a large percentage of white doctors didn't believe that Black people felt pain the same way that their white patients did. I mean, skin is skin. I don't care how much melanin is in it. I mean, so I just think it's a reflection of our society. You have some people that are going to have preconceived notions about race, and they just happen to be practicing medicine. Some are just maybe not as attentive as they should be, but I like to think that no one would knowingly say, yeah, I just really don't care about this particular patient. I mean, they take an oath.
Yeah. And we know there's bad doctors
proper
out there.
and attentive care to everyone.
Well, I think, Aurea, you said there's bad doctors out there, but the difference is, like, if you have consistent bad doctors, then you're not going to trust the medical profession.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a kidney transplant recipient, and I, for a while, did public speaking for the National Kidney Foundation. And I found that all the speeches I had to give were for predominantly Black audience, because that is the audience that didn't trust the doctors enough to go get their blood pressure checked, to go get their kidneys checked. Because in kidney failure, the stats are that more Black people are affected by this, and more Black people are needing kidney transplants without even knowing it. Wow. Because they simply, I'm not going to the doctor. Because if you have a bad experience, for a lot of people, they don't have the patience or the time to go back and endure that again.
Melissa, we went through that in 2015 with my dad, with his kidney issues and his dialysis, and his doctor was a white doctor, told him, pretty much this is it for you. And that was his recommendation. Stop trying to prolong your life.
Oh my God.
I mean, we wanted to go and see a specialist. My dad wanted to go to the Mayo Clinic down in Florida, and it was going to cost us a fortune because he needed to take an ambulance. We needed to set up dialysis ahead of time. He needed to be doing all these other things besides just going to be seen by to get another opinion.
What happened?
And this doctor was basically pretty dismissive. My dad was gone within a few more months. Oh, and so that wasn't the point to say, Dad, why'd you go to this white doctor? I was, put off by his dismissiveness, to be honest. But then again, is it bedside manner, or does he not like Black people? It's a hard leap to make, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's why this is a complicated issue, because I do think there's a lot of white professionals who are unaware that it's not an act of racism, unless you consider being unaware an act of racism. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, there's some doctors who, like, just because they're white and give a diagnosis that didn't work. I mean, in your dad's case, that was pretty overtly terrible. Mm-hmm. But like, there's some people who may be associated with white doctors who do, because, like, to Ray's point, they're not great doctors, or like they don't have a bedside manner. So that's why this is such a complicated issue, that I think that for the Black community, I'm sure it's like, we know where we stand, but for the white community, I don't think there's a lot of people that understand. I think these stats are the first time they've heard these things. Mm-hmm. And I think that they are having to be, like Ray said, educated. It's not like that they're not intentionally doing anything, but that's not an excuse to, now that to not contribute somehow.
Yeah, Mark, I was misdiagnosed by 6 different doctors back when I had cancer, and they didn't know it. And each doctor said I was fine. Because they looked at me, and there's prejudice in all sorts of ways, and this is nothing compared to what we're going to be talking about. But they just looked at me at 37, 38. You're young, you're healthy. It can't be anything serious. I mean, what stupid doctors say that? Kids get sick every day. Right. And I finally got a doctor to diagnose me. But I was really concerned that this is just rampant in the Black community when you look at these stats. I mean, babies dying, when the white ones are living. I mean, it's just appalled me. And I just adore children more than anything as well. And so I want to really talk about this issue right here, because we can talk about doctors all day long, good and bad ones. So let's get down to the real issue at hand. When they did a survey on Research Center on, let's see, this is February 5th, 2019. This is even before everything had happened this past year. 35% of Black and 80% of white responded saying that Black Americans will likely have equal rights one day, a difference of 45%. So 80% of the white population think you're going to be fine, you'll get equal rights. And but 35%, you don't believe that. I mean, say that's not going to happen.
No, and the difference is that it's not an issue for most white families. Like, you guys don't have to have conversations with your kids about what to do when the police pull you over. I mean, it's a difficult conversation. And one of the most difficult conversations I had, I was picking my son up at the Atlanta airport while the whole Trayvon Martin thing was just starting to get going. And he's coming through the airport with his hood on and his hockey bag and his book bag, and he's coming home from prep school for a break. And he's going to this prestigious prep school up in New England. He's walking through the airport, and I jumped out of the car because I saw him with his hoodie on, and I'm like, what are you doing with that hood on walking through the airport?
Oh my God.
And he gets in the car, and I'm like, didn't I tell you not to walk around looking like a suspect? You can't do that in the airport. You have to just, and I finally caught myself, and he said, Dad, my alopecia, because he has it's spotty hair, so his hair falls out, and he wears his hood, because he was embarrassed by his hair. And I felt horrible. But at the same time, I tried to explain to him, I'm like, look, some people look at you as a suspect first, and they don't look at you as a human being. They don't look at you as a hockey player. They don't look at you as a student. And so, you know how hard it is to have a conversation with your son when all he does is love a game where oftentimes he's the only brown face not in the locker room, but in the building.
Wow.
And
Mark,
so
that's
it's about
conversations
awareness.
white parents never have to say.
Have to have.
Why are you wearing a hoodie?
Right.
I mean, you need to talk to us about that, because when you said this, Mark, my heart dropped, because it was just a year ago, right before all this 2020 really kicked in. Because now I don't think any of us can claim ignorance anymore, because I know I'm fully aware now, and I really want you to help us know what can we do to help, because we feel helpless. I know I do. But one of my wonderful Black friends' mother said to me, she goes, Rhea, do you know that when she has two beautiful kids that were teenagers when I knew them, she goes, when you have to have a conversation with your 16-year-old daughter and son when they go to drive, and you have to teach them, this whole other part of their world, they have to teach that when you get pulled over by a cop, 10 and 2, don't take your hands off, ask to take your hands off. We didn't have to go through that. That was not a conversation. And I'm just so appalled that I didn't know that this is still going on or ever went on. So it's news to me. And Melissa, please chime in on if it's news to you. And I want to know, what can I do to help?
My dog is barking, so I apologize for my dog barking. But
okay,
the same for me, Aurea. When my son was born 6 years ago, a colleague of mine, radio host who is an African American woman, we talked about that. She was like, you realize that everything you say to your white son is different than what I say to my Black son. And we sat there and talked about it. And here I was, 44 years old, and realizing for the first time that I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about my son when he's a teenager. I don't have to worry about my son when he's in college.
Nothing.
And it was something that was new to me. And I thought I was aware, and I thought I was, just doing my part to try to help the communities. And that's why I say I think there's so many white people that, because we're such a society that we only know what we experience, and we only care about what we experience, which I do think is a fault of Americans, that we need to start caring about things that have nothing to do with us. But we're taught you gotta be selfish, you gotta get out there and you gotta win, but the byproduct of that is that we don't pay attention to what's going on around us. And I'm certainly a victim of that.
Yeah. Well, Mark, do you think this year has helped at all? Everything's happened in 2020, not 2021. So
I do, because now we've been forced to look at our feelings and our preconceived notions. And unfortunately, our family is a prime example, because here we have one son on this hand who is a professional athlete, and we have one son in prison. And these are not kids that we're not invested in. My oldest son has a Howard University degree. He is a smart, intelligent, Navy veteran.
Yeah, bet.
At one point, I went to a teacher's conference, and the teacher told me he was too charming. Everybody liked him. I never figured out if that was a compliment or a criticism.
Right.
But I mean, we put time and effort into our kids, and he still ended up in prison because of some simple bad choices. You don't get there's no more helpless feeling than standing in court begging for the court not to throw your child away because you believe he has redeeming value. There is something there to salvage. And so, when you talk about where our kids are going to end up, you can't make mistakes as an African-American youth in this country, because one bad decision, and Lord knows I made my share of them, and I tried to explain those experiences with my boys. I was lucky. There, by the grace of God, go I, because I could have very well ended up in a very bad way. But it's something, when you look at our society and what its founding principles on, we still have a lot of those early foundational beliefs that still permeate our society. And you know what, it gets even down to simple stuff. I was at a business meeting not too long ago, right by the perimeter, beautiful office building, and a friend of a friend was introducing me to one of their colleagues. And he said, "You recognize this guy?" And the gentleman said, didn't even think about it, right? It wasn't meaning to be offensive at all. But he said, "No, I don't recognize you, but if it's from sports, I'm never going to guess it." So I couldn't have been, a neurosurgeon or an astrophysicist.
Oh my gosh.
He assumed that I was probably an athlete that he should have recognized,
Oh my gosh.
as opposed to
Anything else?
anything else, right? And so, as offensive as that is to me, he didn't mean anything by it, right?
Again,
He
the
didn't mean
the unaware white
unawareness.
person.
Right.
Yes.
So how can
Right.
we help, Mark? We want you to educate us in like the last 10 minutes that we have. Educate us. We want to help. We want to make a difference. We want to be part of the solution. But again, we feel helpless. We don't want to put our nose where it doesn't belong in certain issues, certain places, but we can't sit by. And I know our whole community, Melissa and I, we don't want to sit by. But what can we do that helps? We want you to tell us.
You know what? First of all, is having the will to help, to want to be a part of the solution, to want to have these conversations. The second thing is it starts at home, having conversations with your kids,
Yes.
meaningful conversations about what their thoughts are on race. Because remember, it's very different now. These kids are growing up looking at very different images of Black and brown people, right? It is not uncool anymore.
My son knows the vice president is a Black woman, and that's the beginning of his life. It's not, his introduction to the world is he already knows that brown people and Black and brown people are bullied more. And he also knows that he sees, people of power of that race. And that's always going to be, it's not something that might happen. It's not, he just knows there's respect there. There's automatic respect in that, but that's not, and in our home, there is automatic respect. But to your point, this is learned behavior. Racism is learned behavior. So,
and it's a choice.
Everybody.
It is a choice. So if you're having conversations at home, that's where it starts.
Okay.
And then beyond that,
beyond.
Right? Mentor a young Black professional, mentor a college kid. If you've got your own company, you have the power to do that. It doesn't have to be a paid internship. It can be as simple as a weekly or monthly Zoom call to help put more kids in the ecosystem so that, number one, you can understand what kind of support and guidance they need. And number two, you start to understand why they get so frustrated, why young Black professionals are so frustrated.
Mark, that's a great idea.
Because
Can you put links here for us? Of any places we can go? That is a superb idea. Absolutely. My whole world community are all female entrepreneurs. We can all do this. So if you can give us some resources where we can tap into to do that, that would be phenomenal.
Absolutely. And of course, my focus right now, and I'm currently coordinating my social justice piece of my company to help with reentry. But remember, African Americans make up 12% of the United States population, but 49% of the prison population.
Wait a minute,
It's
say
not-
that again. That's ridiculous stats.
Right. Black people are 12% of the US population, 49% of the prison population.
And that
So-
develops this mentality in white people
Mhm.
that Black people are criminals.
Right.
Right.
Don't wear a
They're
hoodie.
They're just
And-
prone to be criminals. And there's a
Exactly.
lot of white people that feel
Mm.
that way. I know there's a lot of
Exactly.
people that feel that way.
Mhm.
And guys, that is in large part why I walked away from television news.
Really.
When my son got in
Yeah.
trouble, August 16th, 2016, the worst day of my life, the day I'll never forget. Shortly after that, there was a similar case to his in Cincinnati. 3 young Black men had run into a prominent judge and a prominent attorney's home. They were husband and wife, and they were being sentenced. And I was reading the story that morning with tears running down my face because these guys got like 35 years. I mean, some ridiculous sentence. Thank God they didn't hurt anyone. But at that time, I didn't know what my son's fate was going to be. And I literally had makeup running down my face because I was afraid I'll never see my son as a free man again.
And if you want to do research, look up, there's plenty of sites that do comparisons of crimes, white people and Black people, and the sentencing is completely
the
different.
disparities are
We'll put
awful.
some of those links in, Melissa, if you can find
Yeah.
that. That's really interesting. I want people to know because the written word matters. We see it when you, like Mark, you said in the very beginning of this episode, the numbers don't lie. And we
Right.
don't want our viewers just to think, oh, we're just throwing this out there. It's what we think. This show is about the numbers, not about our opinions.
And when you talk about the legal system, it's access. You'll remember the whole OJ. We're old enough to remember OJ, right?
Mhm.
OJ was the first African-American man in a high-profile place to be able to manipulate the system because of his resources.
Yeah.
When you look at the numbers again, Black people own about 1/10 of the wealth of white Americans. 1/10.
Mm.
So, it's if you don't have access to resources, you can't get yourself a good defense.
You're only as good as your
And if you
lawyer.
watch, yeah, and
Well,
if you
and
watch
yeah.
Just Mercy with Jamie Foxx, that is a great movie to give you some perspective on the Black
Really?
experience with the legal system. It's about
Just
Brian
Mercy.
Stevenson, who defends African Americans in indigent cases on death row in Alabama.
Okay.
And this stuff is all free. It's on Netflix. It's on HBO. You can find it.
have to
13th
ask me
is
twice to watch
another
the
great
movie.
one. Yeah, 13th
Well-
on Netflix too
Okay.
is another one by Ava DuVernay.
And I just want to
Thank you.
jump in and say that, these statistics, these numbers we give, I think for a lot of people, it makes an impression of a judgment on them. So again, the prison stats make people think Black people are criminals. The fact that Black wealth is not as high as white wealth makes people think, well, they're not good enough at their job. If they were good, then they'd make all this money. There's a lot of white people who, again, don't have those obstacles in their way, assuming nobody else has obstacles in their way, and then makes that judgment. So I think the other thing that you can do to help as a white person is think about your own preconceived notions. What did you think when you heard those stats? And then change it to where you have to understand that the numbers don't reflect who Black people are. It's what they've had to experience, right? And so I think that for a lot of white people, they have to do a come to Jesus with their own way of thinking,
Mhm.
subconsciously, and what their parents said or grandparents said to them that really made an impression on them. So I want to run something past you, Mark, that it's nervous white people. Okay. It's people who mean well and they get nervous about them stepping on themselves, which I think a lot of people,
It
especially
happens a lot.
doing right. So there's an event coming up. It's a Black bourbon event, okay, around Valentine's Day. And so my friend signed her and her husband up for this. Now, my friend is white with some Asian influence. So she's Asian white, okay, Asian Caucasian.
Right.
And so she signed her and her husband up for this. And then she realized, no, it was a bourbon event for the Black community, okay?
Not Black
So
bourbon.
it's not Black bourbon like a Black label. So then she got nervous and said, well, can we still go? And so she texted the event coordinator and all they said, hey, thanks for messaging. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. That's
Mhm.
all. And she should have stopped there. So if you could see this, like it should have just been 2 lines, but no, my friend got nervous. And then then she said, we are not African-American and I'm unsure how to not make this awkward. And then she said, is the event open to all? And then she just decides to keep writing.
No.
I still think this would be a really nice thing to do. We just don't want to intrude. Then she said, I'm stumbling with it like an emoji. And then she continues.
Oh gosh.
I myself am a mixed race. I'm so sorry if this is coming across as crazy or wrong. Is it still okay if we come? And then she continues and says, we are really interested in coming. And so then she showed me this text and I laughed till I cried. And I said, the only thing I said, look, the redeeming thing is at least you didn't say I've got black friends.
Oh God.
Right. I know a black person, I understand. So anyway, so maybe talk to the people who are white, who are activists, but they don't want to, step on a toe.
And Melissa, that gets to the kind of sort of the root of the whole issue, right? It's like, because you're white doesn't mean that you can't support African-American friends and family and people, right? It doesn't mean that you don't automatically are excluded from Black art festivals and Black art events or soul food restaurants. We want you to be a part of our culture. We want you to take part in the things that we enjoy too. I'll never forget, I had, while I was at Howard University, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And so a lot of almost all my friends growing up were white. And so at homecoming in 88, 4 of my friends, white friends, came to homecoming at Howard University. And I'll never forget, we got on a bus in Washington, D.C., right near Howard University to go over to Georgetown. And they were the only white people on the bus. And it didn't matter to them, right? Because they'd had dinner at my house. They'd been around my family for, umpty-ump years. And it didn't matter. And no one on the bus thought it was weird that they were on the bus.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can get past yourself.
You can get past being the minority.
Right.
If you
can get past and still be comfortable, you're fine.
Exactly.
We have white guys on our football team at Howard. And we still talk to this day. No one ever said, oh, the white guy's going to hike you the football. No. Michael John's going to hike the football. Okay. And John Arvell was our kicker. But it wasn't even a conversation. We're all wearing the same helmet.
Yeah,
and again, we're all human beings. I want the same things for my kid that you want for yours.
Amen.
Right? I want my kids to grow up and be healthy, wealthy, and wise. I don't want them to be looking over their shoulder when they're in the Target.
No.
Right?
No.
Because there's no need for it. They don't have to steal.
And,
You don't have to look at, because I remember this distinctly, and it used to piss me off when I worked in here in Atlanta, because when I wore a suit, people would recognize me. But if I had on sweats and flip-flops and a baseball hat, people are looking at me like, please don't hurt me or don't grab my, you know what I mean? And because you can feel it.
Yeah.
It's palpable, like you can feel it. And it's hard. It's one of the hardest thing we ever had to do as a family is try to sell a house, because when you sell a home, most realtors will tell you, and this happened to us in Michigan for the first time. We were selling a nice home in a nice neighborhood, and we had to take down all the pictures in the home. We called it de-blacking the house, because we were afraid.
Say that again, Mark. They said, what is it called?
We called it de-blacking. Right, we
De-blacking
unblacked
the
the house.
house.
We took
How
down.
horrible.
We took down our African art.
I would de-dyke the house when my kids were coming over so that I wasn't busted. But yes, to do this for a realtor and for people because you don't want white people rejecting the house because a black family lived there. I mean, again,
which happens.
White people have got to get out of their head.
Oh my God.
Notions.
Yeah.
We laugh because we're crying and we're so sad about it. So ridiculous. Because, Mark and Melissa, I come from New York, and I've never felt so stupid though in my life as I did around the George Floyd time, because my coming to this table was, I've never seen really racism coming from New York. It's such a melting pot.
Rodney King was in California. That's not just, this is not just a Southern thing.
Exactly.
Right.
No. So anyway, so I'm thinking, I don't see color. And I've always said, I didn't think there was a problem anymore. I don't see color, colorblind, but I was very made aware that that's wrong, and I'm just as wrong to be that way. So I enlightened myself. I said, oh my gosh, because Naomi King invited me to be their MC. That's like four years ago, because they wanted to add diversity to their fundraising they did for the African community over in Africa. They were doing in the missions, and they wanted me to be there, and I had the most wonderful time. And yeah, I was the minority. Let's just say I was the only blonde in the group, and I loved it, and they loved me. But again, I don't see the difference, but it is there, and I need to know it's still there.
As diverse as New York is, I didn't have a prom date my senior year. I didn't have a girlfriend throughout high school.
What?
I didn't have a prom date. I had to go to the next town over, which had
Mark, you should have called me.
She was single then.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
different.
But I had a very different experience. I had a coach from my high school ask my best friend. My dad drove a Cadillac Seville, and I would drive it to basketball practice because we practiced late in the day. And one of our coaches asked my best friend, who's a pediatrician here in Beaufort, is Mark's dad selling drugs? How can he afford to drive that car? That's a teacher in the district.
Because they think black
That's in New
people are
York.
criminals. They
Right.
think black people are criminals. That you have to really look at yourself and see, do you have the same mentality? And then you've got to fix it. Because I think
Right.
that's the fundamental. I mean, we can do all stats all day long, but I think people have to really, really look in the mirror
Deep inside themselves.
and say, if a black man came to my door as opposed to a white man, would I think different thoughts? And I guarantee you the majority of people would.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Look in the mirror.
So it starts at home. You need to have conversations around the dinner table about this subject and be proactive, like you're saying, Aurea. What can I do? Don't just sit there and say, this is awful. What can I do? You can go to a black church. You can go to a black church and volunteer and be part of the community. You will be welcome with open arms. Nobody's going to sit around and look at you with them white folks doing in here. No, people are going to say, welcome. Welcome. Would you like to be a part of our community? Because we will welcome you with open arms all day long.
That's also, I think that also shows you, I mean, think about it. There's white churches and black churches. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
It's the most segregated hour in America, noon on Sunday. And my parents grew up in the segregated South and did not teach me to hate anyone with all that they went through.
Wow.
My dad, when he was driving around with the baseball team in North Carolina and throughout the Southeast on his baseball team at Shaw University, they would stop for food and have to go around to the back of the restaurant to get the food, if they got served at all. So, and even through that, I am so thankful that my parents didn't burden me with hate for anyone. And my dad practiced what he preached. When he was an administrator in his school district, like you said, in New York, we were the Rainbow Coalition. He'd have a Christmas party every year. We'd have black, white, Hispanic, Asian, you name it. If he worked with them, and I'll end on this. One of the reasons why my parents were like that, we were looking to buy a home that I grew up in 1972, and my dad could not get a mortgage. And he told me that he couldn't get the mortgage because his wife was of childbearing age. So they would not include her income toward the ability to repay the mortgage. So my dad told a story at work one day, and one of his coworkers was a well-to-do white woman. She was a teacher. Her husband was the president of a bank. And my dad got finished with the story. She wrote down his name and his phone number, and she gave my dad the piece of paper and said, call my husband and tell him I said to give you a mortgage. Well, my dad hemmed and hawed, and he was like, I'm not going to call this man. It's the 70s. We're still, in the dinosaur age. He's like, I'm not going to call this man and tell him your wife said to do something.
On his rotary phone.
Exactly. And don't you know, my dad finally worked up the nerve to call. We got the mortgage, right? But the story gets better. We were trying to move to the new home up in northern Westchester County. And the family had not moved out yet. So that summer, we didn't have a place to stay. The same family of the bank president and my dad's colleague was going to Europe for the summer. They were vacationing in Europe for the summer and let us stay in their home for the entire summer until we could move into our new place.
I love that.
But my dad shared that story with me for a reason. Right? Because he always wanted me to judge each person on the way they treated me, not because they looked a certain way. Right? My dad did that all throughout his life. And my dad never said, oh, that coach is going to screw you because he's white and you're not. My
Mhm.
dad never said those kinds of things to me,
So glad.
right? So I don't know how parents today sit here and burden their kids with that kind of baggage, because that's
Was
what we're seeing.
perpetuated. So I think that this is a conversation where it permeates all races.
Yes.
That racism is not just something that white people do to black people.
Right.
And so that to me, as a white person, I do find I'm concerned that a black family, like you said, is going to now, after all we've seen, tell them, and my dog agrees, is going to tell them that, white people are bad, right? Because of what they've seen in the media. So it's like, you can't reverse what's going on just because in the media you see all the black criminals and think, well, all blacks are criminals. You can't see all these ridiculous white people and think all white people are racist and carry a Confederate flag,
Thank you,
because that is
Melissa.
not true.
Thank you, Melissa.
So,
Great point.
yeah.
Absolutely
Great point.
not.
And Mark, I wanted to let this conversation go on longer than we normally do because it's so important to have. And we're going to bypass Not So Smart today because it's not, I don't feel it's the conversation that we need to end, laughing at stupid people, because racism is stupid enough, on, like what you said, Melissa, on all fronts, on all counts. And Mark, I think the biggest takeaway I take away from this conversation with you, Mark, is something I'm so glad you said, because it had not registered. And I think I'm going to be so proactive on this, is you just mentioned the experiences that your dad had, and that we judge each person by their fruits, not by anything else. And the way we can help spread good experiences, because I think besides just having the conversation with your family, everyone looking in the mirror at themselves, like Melissa, you said, when people knock on the door, really look at yourself first. But here's something we can all be proactive and do, is be a mentor. Because guess what? Then we can start give them good experiences of all races, of all backgrounds, making a difference in the memory banks of people. So I think that'll make a big difference as well. So we stop watching the TV, like Melissa, you always tell us, and seeing, oh, this group of people are criminals, these people are idiots, these people are that. It's not. Go out there and show your fruits to the world. So we can say, oh, I know a really great person and they come from here or there. So profound, Mark. Be a mentor. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Makes me feel good to be able to do.
Well, it's bridging the gap. And you're afraid of things that you're not familiar with, right? If you don't understand something, you're afraid of it, right? But if you get to know people, and church is a great place to get to know people. Book clubs. My mother is in 3 or 4 book clubs right now. God bless her, at 83. One of her group, her book club, she's the only African-American woman in there. And she talks about the homes that they go to. They are gorgeous. But my mother, it doesn't matter to my mom. She's like, a friend of a friend brought me in, and I love this group. They travel together. They go to lunches together. They have these conversations together, and that's my lens. Right. That's how I see relationships with people. That's why I love everyone until you treat me bad. Right.
That's why we have Smart Talk, Melissa.
And I think
all
that,
of us.
Yes, exactly.
We're Smart Talk. We're all different.
But I think that, again, that look in the mirror, I've challenged friends before, like, if your friend group looks just like you, think about that. I have several female friends, white female friends, who all the women in their core group are all white women like them. And it's like, you got to look at that. Why do you do that? Do you feel safe that way
anymore?
Exactly. And so I authentically don't have that. I have not ever had that from high school on, but I notice my white friends that only have white friends. And I'm like, there's something to that. I really think you've got to realize there's something to that if everybody in your world looks like you.
Absolutely. I could tell you something that I'm just remembering now for the first time in 20 years. Somebody said something to me really terrible. And it just, when something really bad is said to me, I tend to kind of just like forget it. I don't want to remember bad. I really like to live with that rose color. Somebody said to me, I'm just not remembering this. So I'm going to hear it first on Smart Talk. I've never shared it. 20 years ago when we left St. Pete, Florida, I remember my husband and I were in church and we were saying, oh, we're going to move to Atlanta. And one of my friends from my Bible group said, why? You're the wrong color. And now I know how to block that.
5 or 6 years ago, I was in LA and I took an Uber from a guy who was from Eastern Europe. And I was heading somewhere and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Atlanta." The first thing out of his mouth was, "There's a lot of Black people there, aren't there?"
You know, oh God, you know.
And I said, "Yes, yes, there are."
What's it to you?
I think it's wonderful. I love Atlanta for that. I absolutely love Atlanta.
Black folks flock to Atlanta because this is the land of opportunity. And
Love
as
it
a
there.
Black man, having moved to 2 different cities after I lived here for a decade, it is very different than other cities. But this is the land of opportunity. When you can
Good.
drive down Cascade and see $1 million homes that Black folks own, you know, and
Yeah.
realize the level of success like an H.J. Russell has had, and so many other African-American entrepreneurs. This is the cradle, obviously, of the civil rights movement. But Andy Young has become a very successful businessman and an amazing ambassador, not only for Black America, but for all of America.
Man.
And it really shows you, you know, how far we have to go around this country, because a lot of people don't feel like they can achieve their dreams in other cities, right? So they got to go to Atlanta.
That's why a lot of gay
to
people
try to realize the
area.
dream.
It's representation, because same with the gay community. I mean, I flocked to Atlanta because there was a large gay population, because I needed to be in a place where I belonged. And the same with African Americans. And that's why I'm proud of Atlanta for that. And so every time people talk about racism, and that's why I bring up, it's not just the South, because I think because I look at Atlanta as a place where yes, there's racism. Of course there's racism, but there's more representation. There's more, like, you know, my son's school, he's in kindergarten, and they spent a whole week, well, they're doing it all month long, but for Martin Luther King Day, it was a whole week about nothing but Martin Luther King. And because my son's school is diverse. And then all for Black History Month, every morning at kindergarten, he's learning about African-American icons. And I am so excited that he lives in this city, because it's Atlanta and it's a white teacher, and it's Atlanta that's inspired this. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And the schools, I think, you know, at least his school feels like this is a very important thing, because we have to show our African-American students at kindergarten how important they are.
I know we got to go, but I got the chance to be at a march for the very first time, right? You've always been in TV. I can't be out marching, right? Because I got to be objective. And so I went to a march. We started at Dr. King's house and marched down to the state capitol. And I got to tell you, I saw at least 10 white families, not 10 white people, 10 white families that had come. And I walked for a little bit with one of the families, and I just said, you know, I appreciate you being out here and appreciate you helping us move the needle, because you and I may not, but your kids will, right? Because your kids are not afraid right now to walk arm in arm with me, right? Because now they have that experience of being around a large group of Black folks who want the same thing they want, right? We just want to be a part of a better and safer community.
I love
right?
it.
And that's what it is. That when it all comes down to it, we're all human beings. And if we do the work in our homes and within ourselves, we can make some progress.
And that's a great thing to end on to, Mark and Melissa were talking about. Do something, go out and be a part of something that you haven't, you know, go out in different communities. I walked in before COVID shut us down, in the gay parade, the gay pride parade. It was the most wonderful experience I ever had. Loved it. Just a whole big community. You want to party? That's fun.
Well, it's like I said, be part of the minority. Go out and be part of the minority.
Yep.
Be a minority. Be uncomfortable. Go and be uncomfortable for a second. And now, guess what? You get to see what everybody else has been dealing with.
Yeah, because fear is false evidence appearing real anyway. And the fear of being different is it's just not there. Just go out there and be part of the community, because we're all part of the human race. And that is the reason I brought the show together with Mark, Melissa, and I, from 3 different backgrounds, 3 different, Mark, you call ecosystem. Drew a blonde moment. And it's so important. I know.
Not a blonde moment. Go ahead, Bob.
And we're going to love each other more. So please come into all of our communities. And we are the welcoming. Melissa, thank you for always reminding us, think on the good, because that's why I started my show, Live Your Legacy TV. It's why I started my summit, because I believe there was more good in this world than bad. That's how I won my Emmy, for telling good stories about good people.
Oh, the Emmy came up, Mark. You see, the Emmy came up.
You know, the Emmy. I haven't had her in a while.
Emmy came up. Yeah. That's right.
Because it represents there is more good, because we have to focus on it and be part of the solution. Mark, thank you for telling us to go out and be a mentor. Melissa, thank you for telling us to go out there and be part of the different churches. And I just challenge everybody, especially when we get out of this COVID, to start really going out of your little circumference of your normal little world and get out there. And there's a whole wide world out there of amazing people, all shapes and sizes and colors and personalities. Go enjoy everyone, because I know when I die, I want to be as friends with as many people as I possibly could.
She wants a big funeral. That's what I heard.
I want a big funeral.
Yeah. But I'm not mad at her. I'm trying to fill a church too.
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah, can you fill the pews at your funeral? Then you're living your life right. Because not everybody's going to get out of their house to go to somebody they're not related to go to their funeral. And that's true. If non-family members make it to your funeral,
You've done something
right.
Done something right. Oh God, Mark, thank you for allowing us for talk to us and let us feel comfortable to know that it's okay to open this conversation, and we'll do it more. Happy Black History Month. Please get to know new historians that you may not know of this month in Black History Month. I challenge you all to do that and get to know great human beings in this world that have changed our life for the better. Mark, I'm going to give you the last word for this episode.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your willingness to be open because you know what, taking an introspective look at ourselves is hard, right? It requires a little bit of, accountability. And, we don't like to hold ourselves accountable if we don't have to, outside of work and family. And well, now you want me to focus on social justice too. And I appreciate you guys saying, no, we can do better. And I think a large swath of our society is starting to come around too, because the polls are starting to indicate that people understand, no, this is wrong. This man, the George Floyd video, as hard as it is to watch, there was no narrative that you could spin to say that, well, he was resisting. Well, I feared for my life. There was none of that. Right. So we finally were confronted with the ugly truth of, one of the more depressing parts of who we are. And now we have the opportunity. We're still here. We're still breathing. We're still alive. We still have an opportunity to do something special and move the needle. And I appreciate your willingness to want to, because wanting to is where it starts.
Amen. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. Goodbye from us from another episode of.
And thank you, Gigi, because she talked the whole time. So she wanted you to know that she is not a racist dog. So there you go.
So glad. Thank you all. We hope you have a great, wonderful day. Happy Black History Month. We love you all. Bye, guys. Have a good one. Bye.